Hey guys, welcome to a new episode of Josh's Car Corner. It is mid-May here in Arizona and the temperatures have started to climb, summer's coming along again, and I have been wanting to get another car to be driving around, so I'm not driving around the GTO again all summer and beating it up in the hot Arizona sun and heat. I've been occasionally looking around for things, and a couple of cars have caught my eye, but nothing that I've been willing to fully commit to and purchase. And this past Sunday I just happened to be out driving around and happened to stumble across this car when I was going to get something to eat. This is a 1987 BMW 325e. Now, you're probably used to hearing of the 325i. That's kind of the sporty version, and that's what a lot of these 3 Series cars are. What the difference is in the engine. See, these cars normally come with a 2.5-liter dual overhead cam inline 6-cylinder engine. It makes about 170 horsepower and about the same in torque with about a 6,500 redline. This has got that same block. However, it's got a stroker crank in it that takes it up to 2.7 liters, and then they put a single overhead cam 2-valve per cylinder head on it, and it's got a super low redline. It's got a 4,800 redline, and it's just a torque monster. It's basically a truck engine. It makes 121 horsepower and 170 pounds-feet of torque. So I found this car sitting out on the side of the road with a price on it of $1,400. So I stopped in, met the guy, took it for a quick spin. Engine runs pretty nice, except it takes a really long time to start on a cold start, like 15-20 seconds of cranking. And the brake pedal had quite a bit of travel, but the brakes do work. And there's a light inside on the dash that says brake lining that's on. So the car at least thinks that the brake pads are worn out. Went and looked at it again after doing a little research and figuring out what it was, because I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on with that low red line on the RPM gauge. And once I figured that out and figured out what this car was, it's like, it's perfect. Because I want a car that's fuel efficient, but I also want a car that's interesting and fun to drive. I don't like boring everyday cars that you see out there that all look the same shape and everything, like Cavaliers, Nissan Sentras, and Toyotas, any Toyota for that matter. They're just boring cars. I want something that's interesting and fun and exciting. That's why I bought the Audi a couple of years ago. That's why I drive a GTO, because it's rare and it's interesting. So this fits that bill perfectly, because 3 Series BMWs are cool, they're light, there's a huge aftermarket for them if you ever wanted to hop them up and make them kind of a sportier car. But for now, this is just going to be a good little cruiser and a little A to B car. I don't care how it looks. I mean, as you can see, the paint is, the clear coat's flaked off in a lot of areas. So it's not the best looking car, but it's 99.5% rust free. There's only a little bit of rust on the left front fender right here where it got dented. Other than that, everything is straight and everything looks really nice. A couple little door dings here and there, but it's never been in an accident. It does have 225,000 miles, but I think they were well-maintained miles, because the original title showed this car was owned by the same woman for years and years, and she lived in Sedona, and she put 170,000 on it. It's now got 225, so somewhere in the last 10 years it's acquired that much. Now the thing is, I bought the car for $1,250. Is it a perfect car? No. It's got its faults. And what I thought I'd do in this video is go through the things I look at when I bought a used car and try to make sure that everything's going to be in good shape, the must points that you've got to take a look at, things you might want to consider doing right away if it's a new car and you don't have any history on it like I have on this, and just kind of the steps you want to look at with a used car to make sure you're making a well-informed purchase and make sure you're not buying a lemon, and making sure that whatever you buy is going to run for a good long time. So I'll take you through the steps of that and what I'm going to do on this car just to kind of fix some of the things that are going on with it, make it a much better, much more reliable car. Okay, so the first thing I want to try to address is that hard cold start. Now, there's usually a couple of main things that cause that, because there's only 2 things an engine needs to run, and that's fuel and spark. It's going to get air through the air intake. So, the first thing I'm going to address is the spark. Considering I have no history on this motor, I just went ahead and bought a brand new set of NGK plugs, and I'm going to put those in. Now, being an inline 6 motor, everything's on one side of the engine, which is nice. And BMW, well, all German cars for that matter, do a really nice job of taking care of wiring and stuff. So you get this common little plastic rail with all the spark plugs in it, and they're numbered, so you can take them all off and not even have to worry about what goes where. This is a distributor-based car, and it's got a distributor that runs off the camshaft right here in the front. So it might need a new rotor and a cap too, but considering spark plugs are cheap and easy to do, that's what I'm going to start with. I'm just going to change the plugs, then I'll see if that makes a bit of a difference. It's also got a bit of a low rev stumble on acceleration, so around 1,000, 1,200. It's got a bit of a stumble, so I'm hoping it's just spark plugs, but we'll find out. Okay, so this is a first for me, but these spark plugs are huge. Typically they're 5/8 or 16 millimeter for a spark plug socket. These are 21 millimeter. I'm having to break up my 3/4 stuff to get this out. So these are massive, massive spark plugs. Can't believe I'm gonna have to use this to get them out, but that's what I'm gonna have to do. Okay, so somebody put Bosch Platinum Plus 4s in here, and I'm just looking. Now, they screwed up because, I don't know if you can see this. Let me get this real, wow, that's hot. I gotta see this here. See, look at this spark plug. This is what's going in there, that's the NGK. Just look at the wide tip on that thing. Now that's a tip that's screwed onto a stud. Look at this plug. All that's there is the threaded stud. The core that goes on top is missing. So I might not even be getting good power to the spark plug to make sparks. So that could be a problem right here. And these Platinum Plus 4s are pretty charred up while looking at them. And the gaps are not all the same. So it's probably only been firing on one gap. So hopefully this right here will make a big difference to how this thing runs. Oh, and one more thing. This is an aluminum cylinder head. So always put anti-seize on your spark plugs before you put them in. Okay, so I just learned something. Turns out those spark plugs are supposed to have that little top thing removed. These spark plug wires are actually designed to grab the threads. So that's a first for me. I've never seen that before. That must be a BMW or maybe German car specific thing. So yeah, I got all the plugs in now, so I'm gonna put the wires back on, fire this thing up, and see if it runs any better. Well, I put the new plugs in, put dielectric on them, put it all back together and took it for a spin, and it still has a bit of a stumble under acceleration that I can't quite figure out. So I'm not sure what else is going on. It's probably something fuel related, but a new problem has developed now that I've got all that done. I brought it back into the parking lot, parked it, shut it off, backed the GTO into the garage, went to start it back up, and it wouldn't crank. When I cranked the key, I could hear the fuel pump cycling, so I knew the computer was working. But for whatever reason, the starter has decided at this moment to pack up and die. So I had to push it, bump started it, got it running, got it back to here. But now I have a new problem. It needs a starter. So before I can do anything else now, I have to replace the starter so I'd be able to start it and drive it around and diagnose. So that's where I am at with it right now. But I worked on it for most of the day and it's really hot and it's getting a little too hot to work out here anymore. So I'm going to hold off until tomorrow and start again fresh in the morning. Get that starter replaced and get back to figuring out what all is wrong with this thing. Okay, so it's been a couple of days since the last time you saw me working on the car. Managed to get the starter fixed. That was a simple problem that was actually kind of unexpected. What had happened is there's a lot of strap connections in that engine and on that whole car. There's a strap that goes from the engine block to the chassis for a ground, and then there's one in the back that goes from the chassis to the battery because the battery's in the trunk. Those were not corroded, but I guess they had some what you call a dry corrosion on them just from 30 years of just age. They built up stuff on them. Didn't look that bad at the surface, but apparently that combined with what was on the positive wires was enough that there just wasn't enough current getting to the starter, and that's why it wouldn't turn over. There's actually a big connection up in the engine bay on the passenger side that actually looks like a battery terminal, and there's a bunch of connections that go into that provide the positive power for everything, including the starter. There's a tray that sits in the engine bay too, and then it looks like the battery might have used to go there, and then for whatever reason BMW decided later to put it in the trunk. So got that working. Also found a broken vacuum hose on the engine that goes from the throttle body to the valve cover. Managed to jerry-rig something for the meantime so it won't leak and so it'll idle smooth, because it was idling really rough with that hose just broken wide open. So what I'm working on right now is these electrical switches. This is one for one of the windows. Though what was going on is the window would go up, but it would not go back down with the switch, but it would go down with the control on the door. So I figured we just had to have some dirty contacts in here. So I just got done taking this thing apart, and sure enough, the contacts, again, were not corroded. They just had this black soot on them, and I cleaned that all off, and I'm hoping that when I put this thing back in, it'll work good. The next one I'm going to work on here is the air conditioning switch, because it's kind of the same problem. The air conditioning won't kick in, and I'm told that when it works, this is supposed to light up blue. This is the recirc button, and when you push that, it does light up. It lights up orange. So I'm hoping it's the same thing in here. I'm going to take this apart, get in here, and find that these contacts are all full of that black soot. And all I'm going to have to do is clean them off, put it back together, and then I will have air conditioning in the car, which will be huge because it's a black interior and it is coming up on summer and it is going to get very hot. So I'm going to take this one apart and see if I can't find the same problem. Getting them apart is tricky. These little plastic fingers on the side hold them, and I gotta try to, there we go. Alright, switch coming apart. That's the AC button on top, and yeah, that contact, I don't know if you can see that. This is the contact right there. It's got some corrosion, some smudge on it. So hopefully, if I take that apart and clean that up and put it back together, I'll have air conditioning. I hope I can figure this one out, because this switch, if I need to replace it, is $80. Okay then. That was unexpected. The AC button no longer click locks. So this has got to be part of that mechanism. This one's going to take a while, so I'll pick this one up later. Okay, it's a beautiful, cool Sunday morning, and I'm working on the BMW again. Right now I've been taking the interior apart and cleaning it, and I've already done the passenger side, so I'll show you what that looks like. It came with factory floor mats, so I put those back in, and what I've been doing is taking the seats out and just cleaning around the carpet really good and getting it all nice and clean in there. And same thing in the back seat, although you can't really see because the seat's back. There's a floor mat there, but let me show you. I haven't cleaned up the driver's side yet. Here's the seat right here. And just show you what 29 years of wear and tear looks like on the floor. That is just a dirty, disgusting mess. And see all that change? I already pulled about a little over $3 and change out of this car, and I'm still pulling change out. So I figure by the time I'm done, I'm going to have over $4 back in my wallet from the purchase of this car. So just cleaning things up as best I can. That clock is missing because the screen's broken. I'm going to try to find a replacement screen. Actually, my friend Nick and I are going to go to a junkyard today, and we're going to try and find some parts, and maybe I'll get lucky. Maybe I'll find one. So here is my progress right now. Okay, it's another night, and I'm out working on the BMW in the garage again. It's been a couple of weeks since I've shot any footage about working on this. The last thing you saw was me taking the interior out and cleaning everything out there. I finally got some parts in to start doing some of the mechanical work that I need. Now, the company I'm getting a lot of these parts from is ECS Tuning. These guys are really cool for a couple of reasons. The first one is they can get a lot of the factory original parts for your European cars. As a matter of fact, when I had the Audi, I got a lot of parts, little things, big things from these guys. It saved me a lot of time and hassle trying to find parts from other suppliers. What's cool is you can get factory original parts, or factory original parts are a little out of your budget. They also sell parts from the European second-hand brand. So I've got a bunch of little things in here. So, for example, this is a plastic trim piece that goes around the door handles on the inside. They're the same on all four, and two of them are broken. One of them is half cracked. So I just got these replacement ones. I think they were like $2 a piece. This is a hose. This is a breather hose that goes from the valve cover up to the throttle body, and the factory one was all cracked and broken. It was leaking. This hose, which is actually formed to fit and is a second-hand producer piece, only cost me $1.80, so pretty good deal. What I really need to do on this car right now is fix the brakes. The brake pedal travel is really far before I get the engagement, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of force behind the brake pedal right now. And what's happening for sure is it's 29-year-old brakes, 29-year-old car, which also means 29-year-old brake lines, rubber brake lines, which I'm sure are decomposing and degrading and expanding under brake pressure because they're so wore out. and there's also going to be crappy brake fluid in the whole system too. So what I really wanted to do is replace all of the brake lines with new stuff. Unfortunately, nobody just makes a complete kit to replace all of the brake lines. You have one on each front corner, then you have mid ones that come to the back of the car and then go around the rear control arms, and then you've got the ones that actually go from the next hard line to the rear calipers. So there's 6 total, and no one does a complete kit except for ECS tuning. And as long as they're doing that, they go to the trouble of making a kit that's braided stainless steel. So this is an ECS tuning brand part, but it is a complete kit, and it only costs $90. Most stainless steel brake upgrade kits that you get don't come in under $100. They usually start at $100, so that's a pretty good deal. So I'm going to get to work on doing the brakes tonight because it was 95 degrees today, but it's only going to get hotter as the week goes on, and it's going to be 115 by the weekend. And so unless I want to be doing this in Africa hot weather, I need to get it done tonight. So that's what I'm going to work on right now. Okay, I've got the first wheel off here, and as you can see, the rotor's in pretty good shape. It is a little dug in there, but it'll work for the time being. This is the factory brake line, which I'm positive is expanding under pressure and just worn out. So I'm going to change these brake lines out. Now here's the most important thing you have to remember before you start changing any brake parts. Every brake caliper has a bleeder valve on it. Before you touch anything, you need to make sure that all of those bleeder valves open up, because if they don't open up and you start taking things apart, you have no way to bleed the system, and you will have air in the system, and if you can't get air out of the system, you have no brake pressure, and if you have no brake pressure, well, we all know what happens after that. So before you do anything, get all the wheels off, make sure all of those bleeders open up, and also that fluid comes out, because if fluid doesn't come out, they're clogged, and then you might have to take them out or take them apart or jam something down into them to try and break up anything that might be stuck in them, keeping them from doing what they're supposed to do. So that's rule number 1 before you do anything else. Rule number 2, before you take all of the brake lines apart, make sure that all of the hoses back off. Now this BMW system is pretty cool where the hoses actually thread in. Instead of there being a nut that you turn, they actually thread into a threaded housing on the hard line. So that should make sure that they come out a lot easier. But before you take any of them off, make sure that all 4 of them can break loose. That's rule number 2. Okay, so I've got all 4 wheels off now, and here's rule number 3 when it comes to working on brakes. Always start with the corner that is the farthest away from the master cylinder. So if your car is a left-hand drive car, you want to start on the right rear corner. If your car is a right-hand drive car, you'd want to start on the left rear corner. And you want to start at the farthest away from the master cylinder and then work your way forward. So once I'm done here, I'm going to go to the left rear corner. Then I'm going to go to the right front corner. Then I'm going to go to the left front corner. And then you also have to use a lot less fluid to bleed the entire system, because the longest lines are going to obviously need the most new fresh fluid. So it's just a good way to do it to make sure you don't get air in the system and everything has clean fresh fluid when you're done. Okay, one more rule I forgot to add. Rule number 4 when it comes to working on brakes. Never use a 12-point box wrench on your bleeder nipples, because unless you want to just strip them off, use a 6-point or a line wrench socket. You don't know how long these things have been closed, you don't know how tight they're going to be, and the last thing you want to do is strip them off in an attempt to open them. The other thing is, when you do attempt to open them, they might not move right away. That can happen with age and just sitting for so long. So what you want to do in that situation is get yourself some PD blaster and just spray the threads, and you might even want to get a heat gun out or a torch and just apply a little heat there so that PD blaster can soak in, and then you want to try and break them loose. Now you don't want to sit there and torque on them all day, because most bleeder nipples are made of brass, and brass is a soft metal. So if you over torque them, what will happen is you could end up just twisting the entire bleeder nipple off, and then what's left will be stuck in there and it isn't going to leak, but you'll never get it out. Then you have to replace the entire caliper. So if your nipples don't open right away, don't worry about it. Just take your time, little PP blaster, little heat, and just slowly work them loose. Use the right tools and you won't have a problem. Okay, I think I just found one of my problems. This is the right rear wheel. I had the bleeder all the way backed out and nothing came out of the caliper, which is unbelievable. Just gravity on its own should be enough to push some brake fluid out of that thing with no bleeder valve in it. So I went into the car and pushed on the brakes really slowly, and finally I started to get something out of it. But there is no fluid moving through this line. It must just be absolutely packed full of gunk and sludge and degraded rubber. So I think that's going to be one of my problems why I have so much pedal travel. So I got to still do the left front, and hopefully it doesn't do the same thing, but I think I'm on track to fixing these brakes. Okay, well, I finally got the inner and outer lines on the right rear corner replaced. I'll show that in a second, but I just wanted to show this. So see down there, that line right there coming off the master cylinder or the reservoir? That is going to the clutch line. Now, that didn't have that clamp on it, and the way I just found that out is I started pumping this thing up, and I got to about 15 pounds, and that just blew off and sprayed brake fluid all over the place. So I managed to find that clamp, put it on there. Now it holds pressure, and now I can go around and bleed the right rear brake corner. There is the new right rear ECS line, and if you look up in there, don't know if you can see it, but you can see it back there, see the red? That's the inner line. That is a pain in the ass to get to because it goes over the rear subframe, and the upstream part of it is pretty hard to get off, but I managed to get it off. So I'm just going to crack this bleeder here and see what starts coming out. Alright, see the old fluid, see the air? That's all going to be from when I change the inner line. There's going to be a lot of air in there. And this thing will start filling. And what I'm looking for is for that fluid to change from that murky brown sludge we got going to something nice and clear. And once it's nice and clear and there's no more bubbles, I know I'm good. So let's sit here and watch this fill. Well, I filled this thing up once, and now I'm filling it up again. But look how much cleaner the fluid is now as it compared to before. And what I noticed too is I was seeing little particles of rust traveling along the very bottom of the hose as the old fluid was coming out. So there was definitely a little bit of rust in those hard lines too, and that was clearing up. So I think if I fill this, once I fill this thing up one more time, I think this is going to be pretty good, and this corner is going to be done. It's pretty clear now. So yeah, I'll get this filled up one more time just to be sure, and I'll move on to the next one. Okay, well, it's the next day. I got the right rear corner done last night, and I came to the conclusion after working until about 9:30 that it's better to work in the heat than it is to work in the dark. So I've got the other three corners to do still tonight. I'm going to try to get everything done. I got the lines loosened up for the left rear, so it shouldn't take me too long to get that done. And hopefully I will get these brakes completely blend tonight, and I'm also going to do the clutch right away. And now that I've got a little more light, I'm hoping to show you a little more of what I'm doing underneath the car here. Okay, so here's where you can see that is the midline brake line. This is the one that comes to the rear suspension here. And then this is the one right here for the brake caliper, obviously. Now the tricky thing, if you can see back in there, is that the other end of that is up underneath the rear subframe here, which makes it a little difficult to get to. But the cool thing I found out about these little brackets right here, see, the whole idea behind these is they hold this line to the mounting point so it doesn't move. And on most cars, these are little clips that they slide in and out. But BMW has it set up so these are solid, and the nut is actually what holds them in place. So as you tighten the nut, it puts pressure on the clip, holds everything in place. I actually think that's a better design because then you don't lose clips. So yay on BMW for that one. So I'm going to start with this line, get this line off, and get the back of the car done. The front will go a lot faster. Okay, I've got the brake lines in, and now I have a problem. One, the camera won't focus. What happens is, when I go to crack this bleeder, nothing comes out of the bleeder, so the bleeder is clogged. However, brake fluid is rushing past the bleeder, so when it's open, it does leak something. So on this one, I can't use my little cup with the hose because it's not bleeding anything out of there. So I'm just gonna have to hold the cup under it and watch it, and until it until it is bleeding clear fluid. So this is not the ideal way to do it, but this bleeder's clogged and there's nothing I can do about it at this point. So I'm just going to have to do it this way. Okay, I have all the brake lines replaced and bled now. The only thing I gotta have left to do is up there. That is the clutch slave cylinder. Now the clutch works fine, so there's not really a reason to bleed it because of that, but it shares its fluid with the brake reservoir, and there's bound to be old cruddy fluid in there too. And I don't want that back flushing eventually into my reservoir and contaminating my good fluid. So I'm going to crack that bleeder and bleed the crappy fluid out of the clutch too, so everything has got nice clean fluid going forward. So the bleeder was clogged, and I had to actually get in and pump the clutch to get the bleeder unstuck, and then it suddenly popped loose and fluid started gushing out, but look at how black that fluid is. So this definitely needed to be bled. Some of you might be wondering how I've been able to bleed the brakes myself. It's because of this thing right here. I've had this for a couple of years. This is a Motive power bleeder. So there's a cap, you screw it onto the brake reservoir and it makes a seal, and then you tighten this thing down and that makes a seal too. And you pump this up and you fill it with your favorite brake fluid, and it generates pressure, and then it just pressurizes the entire brake system so that you go ahead and crack your bleeders, and then you can bleed the whole system by yourself with just one person. You don't need somebody in the car pumping the brakes. So now that I'm done bleeding everything, I'm just going to release the pressure. You just back off the cap and the pressure comes out. And then once you've released the pressure, take the cap off, and then you can take the excess fluid and put it back in your brake fluid container for a reserve, and you are back on the road. Okay, so of course what happens is I get completely done, and then I forget a shield. I had to move this to get to the brake lines, which are up there. So got the tires on, got everything else back on. I'll put this shield on quick and take it out for a test drive and see what I've got. All right, well, it's about a week and a half since I did a last update on this car, and just to bring you all up to speed, my brake test went very well. The brakes now work perfectly. As a matter of fact, I've been driving the car for work for the last week and a half. It's doing amazingly well. I got through my first tank of gas in it. It averaged 27.8 miles per gallon, which is pretty good considering I'm either in stop or go traffic or going 80 miles an hour. So, and that's with all four windows down because I haven't gotten the air conditioning fixed yet. So that's doing pretty good. It can only go up from there. So this morning I've got a couple of housekeeping things to do. The first thing I have to do is change the oil. Now admittedly, this is something I should have done as soon as I bought the car, but better late than never. So I'm going to get that done today. I'm also going to put a new fuel filter on it, and hopefully that will help with the cold start issue. I'm hoping it's just a clogged fuel filter because everything else I'm coming up with is telling me that the fuel pumps are working fine. Okay, here's a little bonus. This is the external fuel pump. This was sitting, it sits up underneath the fuel filter, and I took the fuel filter out and I figured as long as I was in there I should take that thing out and check it out. See, these are the connections for it right here. What's weird is the small nut holds the power and the big nut holds the ground. But they use, instead of like round terminals like you would expect to go over a stud like that, they used forked connections. And the power one, I was able to just wiggle like this and pull it off without even backing the nut off. They were pretty corroded, the posts are pretty corroded. So I took everything off, cleaned it up. I'm going to replace those fork terminals with round ones like you should have on there. And I just tested the pump against the battery and the pump does spin. So I know the pump's good. There's also a damper in the fuel system. I'll show you right here. This comes after the fuel filter. Now I've got a friend who's a BMW expert in Florida who works on these things all day every day who says this thing is worthless and just to take it out. So I'm going to replace this whole section with just a new piece of fuel line. So hopefully once I put all this back together and get it back installed, it'll have the proper power. I'm hoping that it either wasn't getting power or it wasn't getting sufficient power, and that's why it didn't work. So I'm hoping that once I put it all back together, this thing is going to run like I've always wanted it to run. Okay, I just got the electrical connectors off. These are definitely not BMW standards. So someone has replaced this pump before. That's what was on there. These things right here. And they're crimped on. So someone did this a lazy way when they fixed them before, and they put liquid electrical tape on the connections too, which didn't cover these up at all because they're all rusted and corroded. So now I'm going to do it properly by soldering new connections onto there, putting this whole thing back together, and hoping this fuel pump will now run like it's supposed to. Yep. It's not very often that I get to solder, but I do enjoy doing it. Beautiful. See the penetration there? That is not coming out, and that is a good solid connection. I can do the same to the other one. There we go. That's penetration. That's what we want to see. Okay, so got a new piece of line going from out of my fuel filter. Got my new fuel filter installed. Got the pump back in. It hides back up in there. You can see. So I'm going to get ready to test fire it here. See what happens. Now typically when I go to crank this thing, I got to crank it for about 5 to 10, well usually 10 to 15 seconds when it's cold before it'll finally start to fire. There's no fuel in the fuel filter, there's no fuel in the pump, so it's going to take a little while for that to happen, but let's just see how long this takes. Okay, 5 seconds, still got nothing. Try again. Well, it still fires up. I guess only time's going to tell if that actually did anything, so things are going really well. I'm really excited about this car, and there are going to be more videos for the progress of this car because there's still a lot of little electrical gremlins that need to be fixed. There's still some mechanical issues that need to be fixed. It needs a whole new suspension, and I've decided that I don't really like it looking like this with the paint that's all flaking off. I think someday down the road, once all the mechanical stuff is done, I'm going to vinyl wrap this thing and change its color. So maybe some ideas out there for what you think would be a good color for this car. I've kind of got the idea of doing like a copper color. I've never really seen a copper BMW, and I think that would be kind of hot. Oh, and one more thing I need to mention. I have started an Instagram account where I'm going to be posting pictures every day of some of the cool car things I've seen out here in Arizona. Pictures from some of the car shows I've been to, cruises I've done. Anytime I'm going to be doing a project with a car, I'll be doing updates on there. So you can follow me on Instagram from now on at Josh's Car Corner. So follow me there if you like what I do and you want to keep seeing updates from things I'm doing and some of the things I'm seeing while I'm out in Arizona. Going to be a few more episodes with this thing. There'll be some new GTO episodes eventually. Not sure what those will be yet, but those will come. So once again, thanks for watching Josh's Car Corner, and we will see you next time.